Hey, welcome everybody to today's webcast, Selling Backup the Easy Way. Today's topic is on what are you actually selling? I'm your host, Nick Cavalancia. I'm with an organization known as Tech Evangelism. I'm a former MSP owner in my previous lifetime, and I now own two companies that focus on conveying the value of technology to people just like yourself. I'm joined by Matthew DeWitt from SolarWinds. He's a senior sales engineer. He focuses on the backup recovery product. Hey, Matthew, thanks for joining me today.
Awesome, Nick. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. I'm really excited to share, my expertise around backup and recovery to our audience today. So again, thank you.
Oh, glad to have you, and I think it's going to be a real educational experience for all of us as well as the audience here as well. For you guys in the audience, let me just cover a couple of brief housekeeping details. The length here of this webinar, for some reason, it's not on the deck, but that's okay. It's going to be about 30 to 45 minutes. I'm not sure why it's not there, but that's all right. We are going to have you ask questions at any time you want during the webcast. Stick those in the Q&A box. We'll be taking questions at the end and try to get to as many questions as we can. I will note that if we run out of time, we will make sure that someone at SolarWinds MSP does get back to you and answers your questions. Don't worry about that. And the slide deck is going to be available to you after the webinar, as well as this webinar itself is being recorded. So just sit back and enjoy, ask some questions if some pop in your mind. If not, just listen in and see what you get about this. Now, today's webcast is about what are you actually selling when it comes to a series on selling backup. But there's an entire series. This is part one of 4 different webcasts that we're doing. You can see we've got 3 other ones, one on service and scope, one on SLAs and pricing, and one on actually not selling backup at all. And it's a little weird, but you'll get it if you sit in on that one. I made that kind of a strange one that puts a question mark in your head because I want you to attend the last one as well. So make sure you take advantage of all 4 of those. You'll be getting links to each of those webinar invites, so be on the lookout for those from SolarWinds MSP. So let's jump into today's webcast, and the first question is why would you even sell backup in the first place? There's lots of competition already. There's plenty of services online. There's plenty of other vendors. Your customers might even have a backup solution already in place, and yet you're supposed to, we're telling you, hey, go in and you should sell backup too. And there's a lot of sort of reasons, in essence, of where you go, maybe I'm just not going to bother trying to sell backup. But the reality is here for you guys is that as you think about your role with the organization, they're looking to you to be the one that figures out what they should be doing with technology. You're the one that's going to teach them not just what they should be having in place, but what they should actually be doing next with their business from a technology perspective, what's possible, what they should be doing. In a lot of ways, you're their trusted advisor. You can see that up here. You already are controlling most of everything they have. I'm presuming you're doing at least break fix on everything, if not RMM, maybe doing some security services, that kind of thing. And so whenever there's going to be a real problem on the network, I've got here if a disaster strikes, and a disaster can be everything from, the major hurricane or tsunami or, major fires or something, but all the way down to, hey, my laptop got infected with ransomware and now it's completely encrypted. Any kind of disaster, they're going to ask you, what should I be doing next? And so it only kind of makes sense that even with backup, you should be the one that's in control of that as well. You're the one that sort of controls their technical destiny, if you will. And then there's also from your standpoint, the backup does provide you a revenue stream here and a way to continue building that relationship with your customer. And so it becomes kind of really evident that backup is a good choice for you to add on here. Now, Matthew, let me pull you into the conversation here. And I got a couple of questions I'm thinking about on this topic of why I've been selling backup. I've given a couple of reasons here on why maybe they should be selling backup. Maybe you have a couple of excuses even to why they're not. So what are some of the reasons that you've seen partners sort of, why are they missing out on the offering of backup services?
Well, I think you really hit this right on when you talked about break fix. I think most people get into the backup and recovery market space when they're still in the break fix stage of their business, and with that, I think comes a lot of fear. I really do. And so with the amount of choices in the market space, it's not and the truth of the matter is there are not a lot of good choices, right? And so I think there's a lot of fear that if you don't do it right, not only could you lose data, you could end up losing your customer, or worse, you could even be held liable. And And the truth is that you might be right, which is why it's so important to pick a professional grade product that offers A to Z full service, but also does it in a dynamic and flexible way so that you can build those tiers of service around your customer. So that's I think fear is probably the biggest barrier to entry in my opinion.
And I like that. Let's address that for you guys in the audience that are in the break fix. And that this issue of fear is probably a fear of maybe not being confident. Can you provide this service? In some ways, you're not sure what is entailed. And in some ways, doing a service like backup, where they're relying on you continually. I mean, your job would be, or part of your job would be to provide this service every single day, making sure that systems are protected. You're sort of making a commitment to them, and that feels a little fearful. And so that does make sense to me, but at the same time, this is probably one of the simplest services that you can provide. And as a matter of fact, you're thinking about liability. For you guys in the audience, remember, I think it's the third webinar we're going to have is going to be on SLAs, service level agreements, and we can take care of it that way. So there's ways to kind of try to address some of the liability fears. And at the same time, for some of you where you're thinking about, oh man, I'm not even sure what I should be offering, and you're a little fearful that way, attend the rest of the webinars, because we're going to be talking about service and scope. We're going to talk about SLAs and pricing. We're going to go through every single detail, and that way by the time you're done with all 4 of these webinars, you'll have a really good sense, and I think hopefully a comfort level that'll probably abridge some of that fear. So I'm glad you brought that up. The other question I'm thinking of is for the partners that aren't selling backup, maybe let's actually kind of just dive in a little bit. What kind of headache does this cause them? Given that maybe they already provide some other services, and maybe you're thinking that there's some conflict in terms of maybe it's time, or you mentioned the conflict of even like they already have something. I think I talked about that as well. But what are some of the headaches you think it might cause if they're going to add on a service like this?
Well, so I think the biggest problem is not adding on a service like this. I think this is the biggest problem in the market space today. The biggest disadvantage to not selling backup, which is, to say when we talk about a layered security model, what you're effectively not doing is you're not offering a complete coverage solution. And so you're literally inviting your customers to sell into your customer base. And I don't mean that, figuratively. I mean that literally. Like, you might as well just open your books, call your competitors, and walk them through line by line. At least that way you might actually have a chance of controlling the conversation. And you might think I'm joking, but I'm dead serious. You're not being competitive if you're not protecting your customers, right? There's things like ransomware, and that just add-ons to the normal human error. We need to be able to protect our customer, and that's not just about the front end, antivirus, web protection, firewalls. It's also about the recovering from the disaster that you don't want to have happen.
Now, I'm going to go back to that sort of 4th bullet from the bottom there, and I'm going to rephrase it ever so slightly for you guys in the audience. You are their trusted advisor. You need to be it, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, Matthew. You guys in the audience, you need to figure out how to make sure that they only turn to you. That's the goal. I always say, like, if you think about Papa John's and Domino's Pizza, and they're in the same market, the same, let's say, whatever city you live in, and let's say it's a small city, and there's just Papa John's and Domino's. In essence, they might be, kind of really competitive. Okay, we're both here, but at the end of the day, they both would like to put the other one out of business, because then they can have 100% share of the market. And so I think to your point, Matthew, in some ways it's the same way. You're inviting your competitors to come in and provide that service because you're not. And the moment that they come in and say, well, hey, your guy that you have right now, that being you, only provides you break fix. We do remote monitoring and management, and we do backup, and they name all these services. That sounds far more comprehensive, and it feels like that cradle that your customer gets to kind of nestle into, that being you. They're going, that's a much better cradle over there on the other side. And so I agree. I think that's a good point to make, is that you kind of made, Matthew, just the fact that more services actually help establish. I'm putting some words in your mouth here, but it locks in our audience here as being the vendor that's going to take care of a given customer.
Absolutely.
Let's do this. Let's move on. Let's move on to our next topic, which is for you guys in the audience. The question is, are you really selling backup? And the reality here is that your customers don't give 2 flips about backup. That's not what they care about. If you say, oh, you need to back up your servers, and you have to back up your workstations, they're like, well, why? Well, you might lose them. That's not going to happen. So they don't care about backups. It's not the issue for them. I have copies of your stuff somewhere else in the cloud or wherever it is. That those things aren't exciting to them. They do have specific cares, and these are touch points that are going to be when you end up talking to a customer. And we will talk about this in the 4th webinar. But when you actually talk to a customer, these touch points are the things that they do care about. What they care about is that their business has continuity. Right? They do care about the fact that their business can't be without operations. They have availability. In fact, I'm just going to put these up here. All these things here are about them staying in business. That's what all 4 of these bullets are really about. It's just, are you in business or are you not in business? And if you want to stay in business, then you need to have backups and you need to have a recovery plan. And so, in essence, really, what you're selling isn't backup, but what you're selling is a peace of mind around the fact that their business can stay operational. And that's the real, I think, touch point here of where you want to be focused on. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about the pitch to the customer in the 4th webinar. Matthew, let me ask you a little bit. I think many in the audience, they're certainly very technical, so they probably tend to turn to things like, functionality and features, the technical aspects. I know that I always did that. I always say that tech companies, and which includes our audience here as a kind of a tech company, they'll always tell you what they do, but they never tell you what they do for you, meaning for the customer. And so they really turn to functionality, not so much to benefit. Do you agree maybe the focus should be on what the customer cares about more than what backup features that are available?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the funny things that I like to say is there's no point in serving a vegan a top shelf steak, right? It doesn't matter what technology you bring if it's not the technology your customers want, right?
That's funny, man.
Yeah.
Like
so why? Why sell your customer a product or service that they don't want? And so here's the cool thing: you don't have to. With the right solution, you can sell your customers exactly what they want and need. And the key to doing this is flexibility. You're looking for a professional grade solution that could be many different things, because not all of your customers are going to have the same need. And so based on the customer's need, you're going to be able to design this service dynamically around that individual customer, not just for today, but also through their future growth cycle.
Great answer. I love how you're thinking about that. Let me ask you a question, sir. I've named a couple of concerns, the cares of the customer here, in these 4 sub-bullets on the screen here. Are there any other concerns you think that can be met with backups? I'm just trying to maybe give our audience any kinds of ideas they could possibly have so they get into the mindset of their customer.
Absolutely. So, backup is a means to an end. The core and truth of backup is really about the recovery, or, in today's world, it's about disaster recovery. And so having a smooth recovery experience is the difference between a 5-minute downtime and a 4 to 12-hour downtime, right? Being able to quickly recover files that are even suspected of being infected, being able to restore applications and device configuration files that are wrong for any reason, be it human error or outside influence. So it's funny, but I think one of the most overlooked and least talked about aspects of recovery is recovering from human error, right? Everyone focuses on infection, and for good reason, but let's not forget that humans make mistakes, even with the most rigid security. And so being able to recover from that quickly means your customer isn't losing revenue. And so when we talk about concerns, I'm going to loop this back into your original question. I realize I went on a bit of a tangent there, but
no, it's good.
Yeah, so when we talk about customer concerns, what's their one concern? Their one concern is losing revenue to downtime. So if we can negate that, then we are addressing their concern.
No, good answer. So let's do this. Let's talk about, you gave a couple of examples of, the types of backup and recovery might be necessary, which I love. So I think that ties into this next slide here. And my focus for you guys in the audience is sort of, if you're getting totally new to backups, I built this kind of grid. I'm going to show you here in a couple of seconds here. I'm going to expose a couple of things that are kind of hidden at the moment. And the idea is to give you a way of thinking about backup. Just one way, just one perspective. This isn't necessarily the right way, but it's a way that if you're brand new, you could kind of think about, what you should be providing as a service. So we're talking about the customer doesn't want downtime, so there's these possible losses. And they start actually at the bottom, because it's bottom to top in terms of like the least amount to the greatest amount of loss. And so the first at the bottom that you see is things like just some simple loss of some data. Like you mentioned, maybe it's human error and someone accidentally deleted an entire folder on a server or something. It's just some data. Could be an app, could be a service, something like that. And in cases like that, you want to have at least some kind of backup and recovery service that focuses maybe just around applications, files. Maybe it's a given server, and you start off with something very small. Some of you in the audience might literally have customers that have one server. Like I remember in my day, way back when, we used to have like Microsoft had the small business server, and everything was on that one box. I could literally back up that one thing, and that was the one of the service offerings I had. But this might be just more around certain sets of files that are going to be backed up, as an example. For a loss of a server, it might be something where you more go from file level, application level type backups to something that's more about an entire system. So maybe it's image level backups, bare metal recovery, could even be something like continuous replication of an image to another system. Things like that. I think it's a little more advanced in the technology. You'll find though, and I know Matthew will probably give a very cautiously agnostic pitch real quick, but on the SolarWinds MSP side, I can speak to it because I don't work for them, and I can do this. But all of these are all included in one backup solution. But this might be another kind of offering you might have. And then we've got loss of location, and this is where you might be doing something where it's more virtual types of disaster recovery, where a location is gone, so we need to have all of the systems, all of the data, all the applications recovered to an alternate location. And so this is where you need to have some virtualization involved. It could be virtual disaster recovery, could be a virtual to virtual replication of some kind, could be a physical to virtual, where there's a backup of a physical server, but it gets recovered as a virtual image in another location, and you start utilizing the cloud for that. And then the last one here is loss of operations. This is when just everything goes to pot, and you're talking about, let's say, a fire and the entire office is gone. And I've been through a couple of those with hurricanes. I live in Florida, and we have that, and this is where now, if they're concerned about something like a loss of operations, you're thinking about having true disaster recovery, where I put certified DR. What I mean by that is where now you're offering testing, you're validating that backups are good, this kind of thing, where it's truly a much higher caliber of disaster recovery service, where you have someone going, I cannot be down at all, zero. And it might be that you guys are going to start at the bottom in terms of your services and work your way up. And again, this is just one way of looking at this. This isn't necessarily the way, and this isn't the industry standard way. I just want to provide you kind of a way to look at how you might get into doing backup offerings. Matthew, which of these losses, which of course translate to service offerings, are you seeing partners most maybe either taking advantage of, or where are they starting with? I mean, what's your thought on that?
Absolutely. So I think loss of server and loss of location are the two biggest pain points for customers, and so that's where you really want to target your service offering. So most intelligent customers have a backup of their local data on site. If it's a DBA, he's probably got a copy in a folder somewhere on a network share, right? So if the server's still up, they should have easy access to a previous copy of the data. The problem happens when the whole server goes down. A failed drive or even a RAID controller. Being prepared for this scenario means you're offering competitive services, and this smoothly translates into loss of site, right? If you can recover a single server, you want to make sure that your software can scale to very easily recovering multiple servers, or what we would call a site, which ultimately translates into an operation, right? So once you have the foundation, the rest should really just fall into place.
Now, that's good perspective there. Are there any other kind of ways that you might offer here that I look at the services I provided, this sort of loss of graduating scale here, but the other ways? Okay.
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge your perspective here on, building what's lost, right? So looking at service offerings from the perspective of what's lost, it's not always helpful, and that's not an attack on you. The truth is that not every customer is going to experience a loss, and that's a good thing, right? We don't want to have to fail over our customers. That's not our plan A, right? So the idea here is that you should be able to talk about what's being protected. We're selling protection, not the guarantee of loss. We want to make sure that if the customer servers or their site fails, that we understand what's most critical to protect. So if you always work backwards from recovery to backup, then you're never going to have to ask the customer, what should I back up? You're already going to know the answer to that question.
Love it. So I can swap out the word loss with the word protection. That's good perspective. I like that, but at the same time, it still gives them the data services. They've got server, they've got location, they've got operations, and I love the fact that you're just saying, add that on, and that gives you guys, hopefully in the audience, some confidence there that as you're taking on one server and the next server and the next server, eventually you have a location, eventually you have the operation. This is something that you don't have to go after and take the big bites. You can start, effectively, we're not saying start small, like just get one endpoint, just get one workstation, or get one folder. That's not the point, but you don't have to grab everything if you're not comfortable with that, but eventually that's what your goal should be. As a matter of fact, I think that kind of ties into the next slide here, which is for you guys, you want to figure out how to find kind of a balanced offering, because there's going to be a couple of factors here that come into play that are going to impact what your offering is. The first is your customers, meaning what they need. Some of you might be focused, let's say, just law firms, and their needs of protection, disaster recovery, backups are vastly different from, let's say, just a mom and pop pizza shop that's got a couple of workstations in the back room or something. They're vastly different. So your customer type will be there, your capabilities. what you're good at. You might say, for example, you get into the whole idea of doing backup and recovery, but you really aren't comfortable yet, or you don't have yet, let's say, a place up in the cloud to recover to. So you go, ooh, I really don't have that yet, so my capabilities are a little limited. So maybe you just start with the protection on premises of the data, the services, the servers, and essentially the entire location, and you're doing on-prem backup and recovery. That's there as well. Your expertise might be new to this. That's okay. I think Matthew would probably agree, and Matthew, you can pipe in here right now. It's not that hard. This really isn't hard stuff. It's just a question of really getting comfortable with what you're backing up and what recovery is going to look like. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and it's also really important that your vendor of choice is willing to work with you on this. No one expects you to come into a new software vendor as an expert, right? So you want to make sure that the vendor you choose has the capability and the desire to help you grow into the products, right? And that means they're going to help you along the way. They're going to provide you documentation and hands-on training free of cost.
You know, that's good. That's good input there, because I think you guys in the audience need to think and realize that you're not alone in this. You never should be. Otherwise, you're picking the wrong vendor, period. The last one here I just put is sort of your comfort level. Some of you might think of things like on that last slide, the loss of operations. You're going, holy crap, I'm not ready for that. I can't take over and be protecting an entire business. Yeah, you should. You can. You really can. It's a comfort level probably more so around can I recover it? And Matthew, to your point you just made, which I love, you guys in the audience should be partnering with a solution provider that is there to help you along the way with that training and so on, so that you truly understand how to make sure they're recovered. It's not, everyone ever cares about the backup and how long the backup takes, and everyone always cares about how long the recovery takes. And then we'll be talking more about defining what the scope of your offering is in our next webinar, so make sure that you do tune in for that. But while we're talking about that, yeah, Matthew, which of these considerations do you see having maybe the most impact on a partner's backup? Is it the service, the partner that's providing the solution, or is it something else that hasn't even been mentioned here so far?
Well, so what I actually think I'm going to do for our customers today is I'm going to put these into order, all right? And I'm going to,
cool.
Yeah. So in my opinion, this is just my opinion. You may have a different opinion, but in my opinion, I think in order, it's your customers, then your capabilities, then it's your comfort level, and at the end of that scope, it's your expertise, all right? And let me explain why. So first, your customers define your business. All right, so if you have customers with minimal needs, then there's no need for you to be an expert nor have advanced capabilities, right? Which may not serve the desire and the goal of your business. So it's incredibly important for you to target the customers that you want, right? So at that point, it becomes about being able to meet that customer's need, all right? And so that's your capability. And so what that's going to come from is that's going to come from picking a professional disaster recovery solution that will go most of the way in defining your capability, all right? And so remember what I said about flexibility in your chosen solution. All right. So next, it's going to be your comfort level. If you're going to offer disaster recovery services, then you need to feel comfortable working in a disaster. Now, you're probably thinking, shouldn't expertise be your next skill? And the answer to that question is that with your professional grade solution should come professional grade training, like I said earlier. So you want to pick a vendor that's going to stick with you, one that supports you, one that's going to train you and talk to you about the product and your customers need. So experience or expertise, that can be learned. And besides, it's product specific. Right? What's more important is your comfort in deciding that you're capable as a service provider, and that's to your point that you just said. You know, it's like going into an interview. Hiring businesses are looking for someone that is confident in their brand.
Sorry about that. I had myself on mute and I thought I was talking, or I was talking, and I thought it was not on mute. So that's a great way to look at that, especially just reordering those. And you've really thought about that. I'm touched because I put these slides together and you thought about this, man. That's awesome. Thank you. So let's do this. We've got a couple questions that have already come in. Matthew, do you want to take a quick 2 minutes and kind of give an overlay of SolarWinds MSP and what they offer here while we get ready for questions, give our audience a chance to type a couple things in?
Absolutely. So again, with SolarWinds MSP, you're getting the whole package. We talked about this earlier, being the full coverage solution. And so my particular expertise is backup, right? That's all I do. But that doesn't mean that that's all that I understand is necessary, right? So we want the whole solution. So looking at the MSPs, the MSP tools perspective, we've got the manual service delivery, right? backups are great, but how are you going to know when you have a problem, right? That's where, automation, of course, we're going to give you that alerting from backup, but what are you going to do with those alerts? That needs to go into some type of a ticketing PSA. So you can automatically assign those alerts to the appropriate technicians, right? That kind of automation and efficiency means that you're able to do more work by utilizing less resources. And ultimately, that turns into profit, right? The more you can do with your time, the more profitable you're going to be as an organization, right? So, the same thing for remote control. Are you going to get in a truck and drive to your customer site every time they need something fixed? Are you going to absorb the cost of the vehicle, the cost of your gas? Of course not. I mean, you could, but you don't want to. And that's where things like remote control come in, right? We want to make sure that we can get to our customer site in an efficient manner. If I can do that without leaving the building, I'm going to be able to do it for more customers in a given period of time, which means I can grow my business without growing my number of employees, my headcount, et cetera. And then mail security and data security, right? This is a multi-layered approach. This webinar may be on backup and disaster recovery, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're running antivirus, web protection. We've got our firewall in place. We've got our mail being filtered. All of these things need to be monitored. They need to be automated. They need to be managed, and they need to be reported on, right? So these are all things that we can do. We can do it, in pieces if that's what you want, or we can integrate them into one of our 2 RMM platforms, MSP RMM or MSPN Central, right? And using this scope, we can serve both the SMB and the enterprise market space, right? So we really do have 100% of the solutions that you need, and we give you free training on all of those products, right? So you don't have to be an expert. All you have to do is be confident enough in yourself that you're willing to learn. You're willing to put the time in to listen to us talk, and if you're willing to do that, we'll do the talking, you can do the absorbing, and you'll become the expert.